we'll go ahead and get started. You know me, I'm Hayden Smith, interviewing you. This is Mike Powell. Would you like to talk a little bit about what your position is or what your management experience is?
Sure. Mike Powell, work at Trex. I'm currently the production manager for the decking operation at our Winchester facility. Been with the company for almost 22 years. Been managing people directly and indirectly for probably the last 15 years, but in a management role for about the last six. Was an engineering manager for a couple years. Then led our entire maintenance department for a few years and got moved back into operations about 8, 9 months ago.
Yeah. So as you go through all those, obviously you have a wealth of different experiences. There's a lot of different scenarios involved, but what do you feel are the most critical decisions that a manager specifically makes, like as
Um, I,
a leader of the team?
I think it's decisions around your team's well-being. Um, your decisions affect people's lives and people's careers every day. You may be affecting them and not even know that you're affecting them. So you have to put that in perspective in every decision you make.
Yeah. Makes sense. Build the team and develop them. So as you go into that development and working with the team to improve overall, how do you develop a leader versus an individual contributor?
Well, I think leadership skills are in within everybody. Sometimes you need to pull them out. But when you're looking at leaders, you have to sit down with them, have a one-on-one, get awkward early is how I would call it. Um, and figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are. Be observant. Be really attentive about what they do, what their quirks are, and take those strengths, apply them to what they're really good at, and pull those weaknesses and say, okay, I have seen that you are weak here. Let's develop some sort of plan to make you stronger in that area, to develop you to be the next leader. For ICs, for individual contributors, you're going to do the same thing. It's not different because you want to try to pull leadership out of them uh, anyway, because leadership is not a title. Leadership is something that we do every day, and we have leaders on our floor at Trex that don't have a leadership title but lead people every day through a great example and integrity.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely a big differentiation, right? The leader versus the manager, because it's not necessarily a manager that's leading the team or that has the most influence on the team. That's a good point. Um, So then it kind of rolls right into like where you're saying that almost broadly catches everything, because there's the difference in your individual contributor versus your leader, but then there's also like a specific task type of role versus a creative role, like a someone who's strapping bundles versus like an engineer or marketing or whatever, right? It's a big
Yeah,
difference
that's
there too.
a tactician versus being strategic.
Yeah, there you go. So how about as you go through that with the like your tactician versus specific planning, right? Like your two different types there. Someone who's got a very specific role, somebody whose role changes a lot. How do you go through and set clear expectations and hold that accountability in a way that allows for development and some freedom, but gets the job done and doesn't discourage them, right? Like,
I think when you're talking about setting expectations, the first thing you have to do is understand what the role is, what the job entails, and what are the specific tasks that a team member is going to be doing. You need to ask them questions. You have to understand. You want to get their buy-in. So when you're setting a clear expectation, it's well understood, it's in line with what their current process is. And if you're trying to change that process, you've created buy-in on the front end by having spoken with those team members and those leaders. So I think driving uh, that expectation home after having that conversation with them really sets the baseline for that expectation. That
mhm.
expectation is known and understood when you have communicated it and you understand that it filtered all the way from the manager and me all the way down to the floor, which could be several layers down. And holding accountability is just saying up front, here's the consequences of failing to meet this expectation. Here's what I will do if we fail to meet that. If it's first, just having an open conversation in a coaching session, and then moving to, progressive disciplinary action. You really want to avoid progressive disciplinary action if you can, because for me, accountability is not just about disciplining people.
Mhm.
Accountability is about thinking like an owner. I own this. How do I create that ownership? So accountability is just something we do every day. What you're trying to do is create that ownership, and that's what it's so pivotal to talk to your team members.
Yeah, yeah, sure enough. So if you go into, like you said, when you get into the progressive discipline side, right? If you've got someone who you've worked with, you've developed, you've had these discussions, talked through the accountability process, right? How do you effectively handle a PIP, like a performance improvement plan? How do you effectively handle something like that that's not going to immediately just discourage and shut somebody down?
Well, I think again, you've gotten awkward early. So when we talk about going into a PIP, it should be no surprise to the team member
Mhm.
that they're failing in this area, right? Or in a couple areas, because you have already gotten awkward early and had those conversations with it. If you have not gotten awkward early and had those conversations with that team member, then you probably shouldn't be putting them on a PIP because you have failed that leader or that employee. The first step in that is coaching and providing feedback
Yeah.
for those instances. Since you're going to move forward with a PIP, in a PIP, you want to pick something very specific, right? Um, your communication skill, your oral communication skills need to improve in meetings. I have seen X, Y, and Z, right? And then you put a timeline on it, 90 days. Here are the specific tasks that I want you to complete to improve your communication skills in meetings over the next 90 days. And then we have weekly touch points to talk about if you're improving or if you're regressing. And at the end of that 90-day period, it's, hey, you're good, you're off your PIP, or it's time to talk about either a demotion and moving into a different role, maybe back to an individual contributor, or moving or leaving the organization.
Yeah. But having a more specific guided path, like a SMART goal kind of deal
Correct.
with
Yes.
the quantifiable is really important in that case. I said.
Yeah, it has to be measurable.
Yeah.
You can't throw some pie in the sky
Hmm.
uh, expectation out there and expect them to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes sense. And as we talk a little bit about the morale side, right? So how do you maintain, I know every organization has ups and downs in production times, right? So how do you maintain morale in those ups and downs with in those up and down seasons, like with high overtime or low production?
Uh, Clear communication. The
Hmm.
team wants to understand what's going on, right? As you start to ramp down, you have to clearly communicate what's going on in the business. You have to drive that down and make sure everybody hears it. There's no worse morale killer than the rumor mill hitting the floor level of the organization.
Yeah.
So how do you stop the rumor mill? That's getting in front of the team early and saying, hey, we're slowing down. Here's our plan, XYZ. Here's how we're going to execute XYZ.
Mhm.
Any questions? Any feedback? And then take that feedback extremely seriously because they may have something that you didn't think of as a leader,
Yeah.
and can create change and increase your efficiencies during that slower period.
Making sure the why is understood. That
Correct.
makes sense. Yeah. Because usually it's built into the plan, right? So how about for at all different levels of the organization, you can definitely get wrapped up when there's struggles, anything going on where people can resort to like finger pointing or pushing blame. How do you, what kind of tools do you have to foster collaboration and teamwork in those cases, like when there's a dispute or a challenge ahead of the team?
I think it's one of the biggest tools in your toolboxes. And I say this all the time, and you've heard me say this before. It's trust but verify, right? But when you're trying to collaborate and business is slowing down and everybody's trying to like there's this push and pull and people are starting to finger point and stuff, you have to take a step back and be inquisitive, right? You may know the answer to a problem, flip it back to the other team. Hey, I have this thought. What do you think about this?
Hmm.
Ask for their opinion, ask for their feedback, because now they feel included and you're starting to make them feel like a team and you're creating that cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, sure enough. Nobody wants to be told what to do. All
Correct.
want
But
to be
if you ask them
involved.
questions,
Sure.
it's uh it's not a manipulation tactic, but you want people to feel included, right? You want that inclusion. Um, but you want them to see what you see and you want to see what they see, but you're trying to pull them along the way. You might
Yeah,
have the answer to the question, but you want them to come up with that answer.
yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, so as we start to go low on time here, final thing that I'd like to ask is essentially just what advice would you give someone who's just starting into a management path, right? An early manager like myself. What would be your advice going forward?
Um, Listen, be an active listener. Uh, Early in my career, I didn't do that. I thought that I had everything figured out. And I quickly learned that you have to be an effective listener and use your listening skills to improve your team and trying to understand what they need and what you need, because what they need gets the win, right? Not what you need. So listening to understand instead of listening to reply is a key component for a new manager, green managers coming up, because
Yeah.
they want to impress, right? When
Mhm.
people move right into a management role, they're like, yeah, I got to prove myself. I was just given this opportunity. You'll prove yourself by listening to your team.
Yeah.
Remember, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to surround yourself with really smart people.
Yeah.
That's how you win. That's how cross-functional collaboration happens, and that's how businesses are successful.
Huh. Yeah, no, I like that. Kind of goes into one of the chapters we talked about recently was the five bases of power. One of them is expert power, being the knowledgeable one, knowing what's going on. Then there's referent power, right, which is you're building relationships with your team and really utilize people want to follow you and work with you, right? So balancing those two, right? Because if you're just the
Yep.
expert on everything, you can shut people down if you're not listening to their ideas. So I
Yep.
like that.
Yeah, you have to be an active listener.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. You can stop the recording here in a minute, but are there any final words you'd like to give?
Nope. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for giving me the time to interview.
Absolutely. Thank you for calling in.
100%.